On Christmas Eve, my daughter, my late wife's only child, stepped out of a taxi in the freezing Ohio wind, and when I asked her where the Tesla was, my new wife answered first and said she'd given it to her brother. Snow blew sideways that night in Columbus, Ohio. It was the wet kind that sticks to your coat and turns streetlights into fuzzy circles. Our little split level on the east side sat under a thin skin of white. Inside the house was warm and bright ham in the oven coffee on the warmer and the Christmas tree glowing in the corner of the living room. I'd spent most of the afternoon with that tree. It's the same artificial pine I bought 20 years ago, back when my first wife Sarah was still alive. Every December, she and our daughter Emily would pull out the beat-up ornament boxes and turn the living room into a disaster zone. Hooks in the carpet, tinsel, and the couch carols way too loud. Back then, I rolled my eyes. Now I'd give just about anything to hear Sarah singing off-key one more time. There's one ornament I always hang last, a crooked red heart made out of salt dough. Emily and Sarah made it at a church craft night when Emily was 6. "It's our heart, Daddy," she told me, holding it up with paint still wet. The paint is chipped now, the little ribbon frayed, but when I pulled it out of the box that afternoon, it still felt warm in my hand. I hung it near the top of the tree where the light hits it. "Your mom would have liked this, kiddo," I said to nobody in particular. Emily wasn't there yet, but I still talked to her and to Sarah the way I always have. Emily was supposed to be driving over in that blue Tesla Model 3 I'd surprised her with when she graduated from Ohio State. That car wasn't just a car, it was overtime shifts 30 years in the union, and what was left of Sarah's life insurance all rolled into 4 wheels, and a promise I'll take care of our girl. So, when my phone buzzed and I saw Emily's text, "Here, Dad," I smiled, expecting to hear the soft electric whine in the driveway. Instead, when I opened the front door, a beat-up yellow cab was pulling up to the curb. For a second, I thought she'd had an accident. My heart jumped. The cab door swung open, and there was Emily bundled in a navy coat scarf, pulled up, cheeks red from the cold. She handed the driver a wad of crumpled bills and grabbed her backpack and a small overnight bag. I stepped out onto the porch. The wind cut straight through my sweater. "Emily," I called. "Sweetheart, where's the Tesla?" She stopped halfway up the walkway. Her eyes flicked to the empty driveway, then back to me. Something in her face tightened. She opened her mouth to answer. Before she could say a word, the door beside me creaked wider. "I gave it to my brother," Linda said behind me, her voice light, almost cheerful. "He needed it more." For a moment, all I heard was the wind and the taxi's engine as it pulled away. I turned slowly. Linda stood in the hallway in her burgundy Christmas sweater with the fake pearls at the collar. Her blonde hair was curled, her makeup fresh, the house smelling like she'd been in the kitchen all day. From the sidewalk, you'd think we were the perfect Midwestern Christmas postcard, but her arms were crossed over her chest and her jaw was set. "You?" What I asked. My voice stayed low. "I gave it to Mark," she repeated as if she were explaining a simple favor. "His truck finally died. He's trying to get back on his feet. Family helps family, Tom. You know that." Emily stepped up onto the porch and stood between us, clutching her bag. "Dad, she began, then swallowed the rest. "You gave him the car I bought for Emily." I kept my eyes on Linda. My hands had gone cold, even with warm air spilling out of the doorway at my back. Linda let out a short sigh. "You're retired, Tom. You don't need to be making payments on a fancy electric car. Mark's got to get to work in Westerville. He can't take the bus in this weather. It just makes more sense. We're a family. We share." "We share." My gaze slid past her into the living room. The tree glowed steady and soft. The little red heart near the top caught the light and flickered. That Tesla wasn't a toy I grabbed on a whim. It was mornings at Mid-Ohio Credit Union filling out loan papers. It was me arguing with a salesman who kept trying to tack on things I didn't need. It was Emily's face in the campus parking lot when I handed her the keys and said, "Your mom would have wanted you safe on the road." Now, my second wife had handed those keys to her brother like they were nothing. "Does Mark know the titles in my name?" I asked. Linda frowned like I'd said something rude at the dinner table. "Why does that matter? You bought it for the family." "For Emily. And Mark is family." Emily's eyes filled. "Dad, I didn't want to," she started. Linda cut her off. "Don't start, Emily. It's Christmas Eve. Your uncle needed help. Your father would have agreed if he wasn't so stubborn about money." Stubborn about money. Sarah used to call it being careful. We grew up counting every dollar twice. Linda grew up in chaos, late rent, broken down cars, someone always needing to be rescued. Mark most of all. Something inside me went very still the way it used to when a panel hummed wrong on a job site. When you hear that sound, you don't argue with it. You stop and check the wiring or somebody gets hurt. Emily, I said quietly, pulling my eyes away from Linda. Did you tell your uncle he could have your car? She shook her head, shoulders curling in. Mom, she caught herself corrected softly. Linda said you'd be okay with it. She said it was your idea, that you talked about it. My jaw clenched. I looked back at Linda. She didn't flinch, but her mouth went tight. I never said that, I told Emily, not once. Silence dropped over the doorway, heavy as wet snow. Cold air pushed at my back, warm air at my chest. I stood in the middle, feeling both. Linda shrugged. Well, it's done now, she said. Mark's already got the car. We can talk about it after dinner. Don't ruin Christmas over a vehicle, Tom. Emily brushed past me into the house. As she walked by the tree, she reached out and touched that crooked red heart just for a second, like she needed to feel something solid. Go put your things in your room, kiddo, I said. My voice sounded older than I felt. I'll be there in a minute. She nodded and disappeared down the hall. I stayed in the doorway, looking at the tree, at the ornament, at my reflection in the front window. Sarah's face used to be there next to mine this time of year. Now it was just me, 58, and tired, suddenly feeling like a guest in my own home. Finally, I turned back to Linda. Well, I said, steady now. If Mark's driving my car, I guess I'll have to pay him a visit. I didn't sleep much that night. After Emily went to bed, I sat in the dark living room, with the tree light still on, staring at that crooked red heart near the top. The house was silent except for the heater kicking on every few minutes. Linda had gone upstairs early, saying she was done dealing with my attitude. I just sat there and let the quiet settle. Grief is strange. You think you're past it after 15 years. You think you've built a life sturdy enough to carry it. But all it takes is one moment, one stolen car, one cheap lie to knock the wind out of you and remind you how thin that new life really is. When Emily was born, Sarah used to joke that our daughter came into the world looking like she already had questions. Always watching, always thinking. Sarah said Emily got that from me. I never thought I'd raise her alone. Never thought I'd sit through middle school awards ceremonies with an empty chair beside me. Never thought I'd be the one giving her the talk about driving, dating, college budgets, everything Sarah and I were supposed to do together. But we did it. Emily and I got through it. And when I met Linda years later, I thought maybe life was giving me permission to move forward again. Linda wasn't a bad person, not at first. She was warm, funny, and she liked to cook. She'd show up at my house with casseroles, homemade chili banana bread. She'd sit with Emily and talk about school and clothes and the little things teenage girls like to share. She never pushed, never forced, not in the beginning. But somewhere along the way, things shifted. Linda still smiled, still cooked, still talked, but there was a layer underneath, thin, sharp, and selfish. She never said it out loud, but she always made it clear Mark came first. Mark needed help. Mark couldn't catch a break. Mark would turn things around if only he had a little support. And somehow that support always came from me. It started small, $50 here, gas money there. Then it became, can you co-sign this, or Mark needs a little loan. He'll pay it back. Then Linda started nudging, not outright asking, just nudging. A guilt trip here. A why are you being so harsh there? And now she'd crossed the line I didn't even know she saw. The next morning, Christmas morning, I drove over to Mark's duplex in Westerville. The wind had stiffened overnight and blew fine snow across the roads. I parked up the block because the driveway was jammed full. A battered Chevy Malibu sat crooked behind the Tesla. Mark must have borrowed someone else's car. From the sidewalk, I spotted the Tesla wedged between the Malibu and a neighbor's old pickup. Mark had used a steering wheel lock, one of those bright yellow bars you clamp across the wheel. I walked up to the car and tested the handle. Locked. I tapped the glass. No response from the house. I pulled out the spare key, pressed the unlock button, and the car chirped once, but the wheel stayed clamped tight. I bent down to peer inside. Fast food bags littered the passenger seat. A crumpled flannel jacket lay across the dashboard. My jaw tightened. Behind me, a voice barked, "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" I turned to see a man in sweatpants and a Cleveland Browns hoodie standing on his porch, phone in hand. "That your car?" he asked, eyes narrowed. "Yes," I said. "I'm here to, I'm calling the cops," he snapped. "We've had enough theft around here. Last week, someone tried breaking into my neighbor's SUV. Not happening again." It's my car, I repeated. Yeah, he said, raising his phone. Then why are you sneaking around it at 8 in the morning? Before I could answer, the front door of Mark's duplex swung open. Tom, Mark called, fake surprised. What the hell are you doing here? I straightened up. I'm here to take my car back. Mark laughed, actually laughed. Buddy, Linda said you gave it to me. You need to talk to your wife. I didn't give you anything, I said. Mark shrugged. Well, that's between you two. But the car's mine, and if you want to come onto this property causing problems on Christmas morning, you can deal with the cops. The neighbor raised his phone higher, ready to dial. I stepped back. My hands shook, not with fear, but with a humiliation so sharp I felt it in my teeth. I turned and walked toward my truck without another word. Behind me, Mark called out, next time call before you show up. Don't be weird about it. I got into my Ford, slammed the door, and sat for a long minute with the heater blasting. My breath fogged the air. My heart thudded under my coat. I wasn't scared. I wasn't even angry. I was embarrassed, like I'd just been scolded by the universe in front of strangers. On the drive home, I passed church billboards flashing Merry Christmas and radio stations playing carols. Normally, I'd let that stuff roll off me, but that morning, it all sounded hollow. When I got home, Linda was sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee. Where were you, she asked without looking up. Trying to get Emily's car back. She sighed dramatically. Tom, you can't do that. You scared the neighbors. Mark told me. You're becoming obsessive. I stared at her. I'm becoming what? She finally looked up, her expression smoothing into something patronizing. You're letting this get to you. It's Christmas. Emily doesn't need a Tesla right now. Mark needs it more. Don't make this about Sarah again. That was years ago. A coldness ran through me, clean and sharp. This isn't about Sarah, I said quietly. It's about respect. Well then, respect my family, she snapped. I nodded slowly. I do, but I think it's time they respected me back. She rolled her eyes and stood up. We're not talking about this again today. I'm going to get ready for dinner at Mom's. She walked away, leaving me in the kitchen with the sound of the heater and the faint chime of the tree ornaments brushing each other in the living room. I sat down at the table and folded my hands. I felt tired in a way that sleep wouldn't fix. If Mark wanted to make this a fight, he'd picked the wrong man. 2 days after Christmas, the weather warmed just enough for the snow to melt into gray slush on the sidewalks, the kind that soaks your socks if you step wrong. I hadn't touched the ham leftovers in the fridge, and Linda had stopped trying to talk to me, except for the occasional tight-lipped pass, the salt at dinner. Emily had gone back to her apartment near Ohio State, but she called every night. Each call ended with the same question, Dad, are you okay? And each time I lied the same lie, yes, sweetheart, I'm fine. But I wasn't fine. The house felt wrong, like Sarah's ghost had stepped outside for a smoke and wasn't coming back in. On the morning of December 27th, I decided something. I needed facts. Not feelings, not arguments, not shouting matches with Linda. Cold facts. And there was only one place to get them. Mid-Ohio Credit Union. I'd been a member there since 1992, back when Sarah and I opened a savings account for our wedding fund. After she passed, the women behind the counter became something like Family Janet especially. She'd seen Emily grow up. She'd heard about every school play, every graduation, every time Emily made honor roll. When Sarah died, Janet slipped a sympathy card into my hand. For when things get quiet, she told me. Things had been quiet ever since. When I pushed open the glass door that morning, the bell above it jingled. The place smelled like warm toner and peppermint coffee creamer. Janet sat behind her counter, glasses on her nose, tapping on her keyboard. She looked up, and the second she saw me, her face softened. Well, if it isn't Tom Harris, she said. Haven't seen you since last spring. You doing all right? You look a little pale. I walked over to her counter. Just need to check a few things, I said. About the loan on my daughter's Tesla. Her eyebrows lifted. Sure thing. Let me pull up your account. She clicked, typed, clicked again. Then her fingers stopped moving. Her face didn't change, but something in her shoulders did. Well, she said carefully, let me scroll through these transactions. I leaned an arm on the counter. Everything okay? She swallowed. Tom, have you been making a lot of transfers lately? No, I said. Just the regular stuff. Mortgage, utilities, groceries. Janet turned the screen slightly, not enough for me to read everything clearly, but enough for me to see the pattern. Transfer, online payment. Cash withdrawal, transfer. Most of them to accounts I didn't recognize. Every one of them for Mark. My throat went dry. Those aren't mine, I said quietly. I didn't authorize any of those. Janet hesitated. Your wife has access to the joint account, doesn't she? She does. More clicking, more scrolling. Then she froze. Her fingers hovered over the mouse. Tom, she said, voice softer now. There's one more thing. I braced my hands on the counter. Go ahead. One of these transfers, one of the larger ones, it went out on May 14th. I frowned. What's special about May 14th? She looked at me and her eyes softened. That's the anniversary of Sarah's passing, isn't it? It hit me like a gut punch. On the day I took flowers to Sarah's grave. On the day I sat on the cemetery bench with a thermos of coffee and told her I was doing my best. On that day, Linda transferred nearly $2,000 to Mark. Something inside me cracked, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet break, the kind that changes the shape of something forever. Janet reached across the counter and touched my hand. I'm so sorry, Tom. I nodded once, swallowed hard. Thank you for showing me. You might want to speak with someone. Maybe a lawyer, she said gently. Someone who can help you protect yourself. I breathed in slow and steady. Yeah, I think I will. I left the credit union and sat in my truck for a long time watching wet snow slide down the windshield. I felt numb, not angry, just numb. Like my body had turned itself down to low volume so I wouldn't break apart. When I finally drove home, I didn't go inside. Instead, I sat in the driveway and called Linda. She answered on the third ring. Tom, I'm at the store. What do you want? I saw the transfers, I said simply. A beat of silence. Then her voice changed. Soft, defensive, irritated. Oh my God, Tom, are we really doing this? Mark needed help. You're overreacting. You always make things bigger than they are. I didn't raise my voice. You took money on Sarah's Memorial Day. That was months ago, she snapped. Why does that matter? It matters to me, I said. She exhaled sharply. Fine. We'll talk later. I don't have time for your mood right now. She hung up. I stared at my phone. Then I placed it face down on the passenger seat. I wasn't sure what hurt worse, the betrayal or how easily she dismissed it. That afternoon, I drove downtown to a small brick office near the courthouse. A green sign read, Mitchell, Crane and Associates, Family Law. Inside, a receptionist directed me to a young lawyer named Daniel Crane. He couldn't have been more than 30, but he had a steady, no-nonsense way of talking. After I laid everything out, the Tesla, the keys, Mark the bank, transfers, the anniversary, Daniel leaned back in his chair and tapped a pen against his notebook. You've got two problems, he said. One, your wife's been using joint funds without permission. Two, someone is driving a vehicle legally titled to you. He set the pen down. You can get the car back, he continued, but you'll want to do it the right way, legally, cleanly. No surprises that could be used against you. He slid a paper across the desk. This is a formal demand letter. It requires Mark to return the vehicle or pay its full value. If he refuses, we escalate. I nodded. Okay. Daniel leaned forward. Do not confront him alone again, and don't let your wife guilt you out of this. People like Mark don't stop taking. They stop only when someone makes them. His words settled into my chest like a weight, but a solid one. Something to hold on to. When I stood to leave, Daniel said one more thing. By the way, Mark's planning to show up at your church's Christmas program this weekend. I know because the deputy who serves notices is a member there. Mark's been bragging about showing up in that Tesla. My jaw tightened. He wants an audience, Daniel said. I exhaled slowly. Then he's going to get one. I drove home from the lawyer's office with the heater blasting and the radio off. My mind was running too hot and too cold at the same time. Every mile between downtown Columbus and my neighborhood felt heavier than the last. There are moments in life when something in you shifts quietly but permanently. That afternoon, I felt the shift. I wasn't just a hurt husband anymore. I was a man who finally understood what needed to be done. When I pulled into the driveway, Linda's SUV was gone. Good. I didn't have the strength for another argument. I walked inside, hung up my coat, and sat at the kitchen table with Daniel's paperwork spread in front of me. The formal demand letter. Instructions for protecting my assets. Steps to isolate joint accounts. There was a time when I would have felt guilty taking these measures against my own wife. But that time passed the minute I saw the bank transfer dated on Sarah's Memorial Day. That was the moment something protective in me woke up, protective of my daughter and protective of the memory of the woman who built this life with me long before Linda ever walked into it. Emily called around 7 that evening. "Dad, you doing okay?" I tried to keep my voice even. "Yeah, kiddo, I'm hanging in there." She hesitated. "Mom, Linda texted me. She said you were being dramatic." My jaw tightened. Is that what she said? "Dad, did she really give Uncle Mark my car without you knowing?" I closed my eyes. "She did." Emily's voice wavered. Why would she? "Because she doesn't see you as hers," I said. I hated hearing the truth out loud. "She sees Mark as her responsibility, not you." There was a long, painful pause. "I miss Mom," she whispered. "Me too," I said, "every day." Another silence, then she steadied her voice. "What are you going to do?" I looked at the papers on the table. "I'm going to fix this, but I need you to trust me." "I do," she said, "always." After we hung up, I sat with that feeling, trust, warming the coldest parts of me. Sarah used to tell me you can survive anything if your kid still believes in you. She was right. The next morning, I returned to Daniel's office and signed everything. We closed the joint account. We sent Linda a certified letter revoking her online banking access. We prepared the civil demand for Mark, and Daniel contacted a deputy at the county sheriff's office who would accompany us when serving the notice for safety and clarity, he said. By the time I left the office, everything was in motion. That night, Linda confronted me in the kitchen after she opened the certified letter. "What is this?" she demanded, waving the envelope like a piece of trash. "You know what it is," I said. "You revoked my access to our accounts." "Our accounts," I repeated. "Funny how you only call them that when you want something." Her face flushed red. "I used that money to help my brother. You should appreciate that I care about my family." "You used money Sarah left behind," I replied. "And you used it without asking." "Oh, stop acting like a martyr," she snapped. "You worship that woman's memory. You talk about her like she's still here. Well, she's not. I am. And Mark is family." I spoke quietly. "Emily is my family. Sarah is my family. You married into that, not the other way around." She shook her head and stormed upstairs. I didn't follow. I'd spent years chasing peace in this marriage. Tonight I let the silence settle and didn't feel guilty for it. 2 days later came the church's Christmas Eve program, the one Linda's family never missed. Singing, the kids' skits, the candle lighting. I usually sat beside Linda politely. This year I planned to stand in a different part of the building entirely. Around 4:30 p.m., Daniel met me in the church parking lot. A sheriff's deputy named Harold joined us a few minutes later. Harold was a big man in his early 60s with a white mustache and calm eyes. He looked like he'd rather be fishing, but he gave me a firm nod. "You Tom?" he asked. "That's me." "Well," he said, slipping a folded stack of papers into his coat. "Let's keep this clean. We're just serving notice. You don't raise your voice." He doesn't raise his voice. Nobody gets embarrassed unnecessarily. I nodded once. That's up to him. Daniel checked his watch. Mark should be here any minute. Snow began to fall, thick, drifting flakes that softened the edges of everything. The church glowed warm through the stained glass windows. Families hurried inside, bundled in coats, kids bouncing with excitement. If someone had taken a picture, you'd swear the scene belonged on a Christmas card. Then headlights turned into the lot. A blue Tesla rolled slowly across the snow. And there he was, Mark wearing a leather jacket, too new to be his hair slicked back, sunglasses on, even though it was nearly dusk. He stepped out of the car like he thought someone might ask him for an autograph. Linda's parents, cousins, and siblings waved from the church steps. Mark gave a two-finger salute toward them, like he was the grand marshal of a parade. I stood beside Daniel and Harold watching. "He doesn't know," Daniel murmured. "No," I said, "he really doesn't." Mark spotted me then. His smile faltered. "Uh-oh," Harold said under his breath. "Here we go." Mark strutted toward us, trying to recover his swagger. "Well, look who's finally calming down," he said. "Listen, Tom, this car." But he didn't get to finish. Harold stepped forward. "Mark Thomas, you're being served." He extended the papers. Mark blinked. "Served what?" Daniel spoke clearly. "A civil demand requiring return of the vehicle you're unlawfully driving, or payment of its full value." Mark's face twisted. "What? No, no," Linda said. "Linda doesn't own the car," Daniel said. "Tom does." Mark turned to me. "Dude, seriously? You had me dragged out here like a criminal." I met his eyes calmly. I asked you politely. You chose this. He scoffed. Linda said you gave it to me. Linda lied, I said. Families slowed on their way inside. Heads turned. Linda appeared in the doorway, eyes wide as she realized what was happening. Mark jabbed a finger at me. You can't do this. Linda said you were fine with it. From beside the church steps, Linda shouted, I just wanted to help my brother. I looked at her and said the quietest, coldest sentence I've spoken in my life. You helped him with my dead wife's money. The whole parking lot went silent, so quiet I could hear the snow hitting the ground. Linda's face drained of color. Mark sputtered. This is insane, man, just insane. You're ruining Christmas over a car. I pulled the spare fob from my pocket. It was never yours, Mark, and it sure as hell wasn't hers to give away. I pressed the button. The Tesla's lights flashed. Mark spun around. No, you can't just... But Harold stepped between us. Sir, step aside. The owner is reclaiming his property. Mark backed away, hands gripping his hair. People whispered. A few shook their heads. A couple of Linda's relatives glanced at her like they'd never seen her before. I walked past Mark, opened the driver's door, and slid into the seat. It smelled like stale fast food and cheap cologne. I exhaled slowly, letting the moment settle. Emily appeared on the far side of the lot. She must have driven separately. When she saw me in the Tesla, her face softened in relief. She walked over and placed a hand on the roof. Ready to go home, Dad? She asked. Yeah, I said. Let's go. Emily climbed into the passenger seat of the Tesla, brushing a dusting of snow off her coat as she shut the door. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The heater hummed, warming the cold air inside the car. Snowflakes tapped lightly on the windshield, catching the yellow glow of the church parking lot lights. I looked at my daughter, Sarah's daughter, and something in me finally settled. Not fixed, not healed, but settled. Outside, Mark had cornered Linda near the sidewalk. He was talking fast, waving his arms, his breath puffing white clouds into the air. Linda kept glancing at me like she couldn't believe I'd actually followed through. Her whole body language had changed. Shoulders drawn tight, hands, fluttering eyes darting toward her family, as if begging someone to step in and defend her. But no one did. People just watched. Not with cruelty, not with joy, with a kind of sad, quiet understanding. Folks in their 50s and 60s have seen enough of life to recognize a moment when a man finally says enough. I eased the Tesla into drive and pulled away, snow crunching under the tires. As we exited the lot, Emily looked back at the church. They're staring, she said softly. They'll forget about it by next week, I paused. Or maybe they won't. Either way, it's not our problem. She studied me for a moment. Dad, I'm proud of you. I swallowed. My hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. Your mom would have handled it better. Emily shook her head. Mom would have told you to stand up for yourself years ago. We drove in silence for a few minutes, passing houses with lit wreaths and glowing reindeer in the yards. Somewhere a radio was playing an old Bing Crosby song. The world looked peaceful, but my chest still felt like someone had scraped something raw inside it. At a stoplight, Emily reached over and took my hand. Dad, I'm really sorry. You didn't do anything wrong, I said. She looked down at her lap. Linda always tried to make me feel like I was second place. She'd say things like, Mark's had a harder life than you, or your dad needs to stop spoiling you. And I didn't know how to push back. Hey, I said gently, you shouldn't have to push back against your own stepmother. That's on her, not you. The light turned green. When we pulled into the driveway at home, the Christmas lights I'd put up earlier in the month were still glowing along the gutters, warm, steady, familiar. Linda hadn't gotten around to taking them down. She never helped with them, but she liked telling the neighbors how festive they made the house look. I put the car in park but didn't move. Dad, Emily asked. I'm thinking, I said, about Sarah, about Linda, about all the ways a house can feel full and empty at the same time. Inside, the living room was just as we left it. The tree lights on the heart ornament hanging crooked, the faint scent of pine and cinnamon lingering in the air. Emily went upstairs to change into warm clothes, while I sat on the couch and looked around. A few minutes later, Linda walked in. She closed the front door softly, her face blotchy from crying and the cold. She stood there for a moment, unsure of whether to leave her coat on or take it off. Eventually, she shrugged it off and hung it by the closet. Then she faced me. Tom, she said, voice trembling, I didn't mean for things to get this bad. I nodded once, but they did. She twisted her wedding ring. I was just trying to help my brother. You helped him with money that wasn't yours, I said. Money Sarah left behind. Money for Emily, not for Mark. Her eyes filled. I made a mistake. You didn't make a mistake, I said gently. You made a choice. Over and over again. And each time you chose Mark. She wiped her eyes. I just wanted. I know what you wanted, I interrupted. But I needed you to want this family, Emily and me. You never did. She looked away. What do you want me to say? I want you to hear me, I said. I'll go to counseling. I'll work on this. But things are changing. Financially, we're separate from now on. No more joint accounts. No more decisions behind my back. And if Mark needs help, he can get it somewhere else. Linda didn't respond. She just nodded weakly. After she went upstairs, Emily came down and sat beside me on the couch. She leaned her head on my shoulder the way she used to when she was little. You okay, Dad? Getting there, I said. We sat together for a long time watching the tree lights flicker. Neither of us spoke. The house felt quiet but not heavy the way it had the past few days. It felt honest, and that was something. Finally, Emily whispered, Mom would be proud of you. My throat tightened. I put an arm around her shoulders. I hope so. We stayed like that until the clock in the hall chimed midnight. When Emily finally pulled away to head upstairs, she paused at the first step. Dad. Yeah, I love you. I nodded. Love you too, kiddo. After she disappeared upstairs, I turned off the lights and sat for one more moment in the glow of the tree. I looked at the heart ornament, our heart Sarah used to call it, and I felt something I hadn't felt in days. Peace. Not perfect peace, but enough. I stood, walked to the front door, and locked it. When I turned back to the room, everything felt clearer, softer, like the house had finally taken a deep breath. Before I went upstairs, I said something out loud, quiet but firm, directed at the part of me that still worried too much about keeping the peace. You did the right thing. And for the first time in a long while, I believed it. If you've listened this far, thank you. Stories like mine aren't easy to tell, but sometimes they're necessary. Because we all reach a point in life where someone takes too much for too long, your trust, your time, your heart, or your hard-earned money, and you have to make a choice. You can keep letting them, or you can finally say enough. And sometimes, the best gift you can give yourself is exactly that. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you'd like more stories like this, go ahead and subscribe and stay with us for the next one.